Every single year, I make a video on how I would start a candle business if I were starting fresh. Because the candle industry changes, it keeps evolving. And trends change, costs shift, the strategies that worked, just last year might not even cut it this year. And case in point, I am standing at my old warehouse that I'm going in right now. It's late at night, if you couldn't tell. As you can see behind me, it's pretty empty. And that's because candle industry, candle businesses, small business in general, doesn't just change annually, it changes all the time. But as you can see, we've pretty much cleared this out. We are in our fourth space in the past 5 years. And the reasons for those changes are a few. Sometimes we have just grown through normal growth of being in business for several years. Other reasons is we've released new product lines. We've just outgrown our space. We needed more space for inventory. We've shifted our business model to include other avenues and several other reasons. Now, my point being is you've got to be prepared for change, not just once you're in business, but even starting out in the first place. I'm going to walk you through the latest candle trends, the must-know strategies for this year, or ones that I think just apply every year, and the pitfalls you need to avoid if you want to build a successful business in this industry that really stands out. By the end of this video, hopefully you'll have a step-by-step roadmap to turn your candle making business into a thriving business in 2026 and beyond. Now, excuse the mess, excuse the empty space. I did leave a recording area, so that's where I'm gonna head right now, and we'll continue on with this video. All right, so I'm back. I'm finally situated. I've warmed up a little bit. I got my coffee. Let's rock and roll here. So as I alluded to earlier, the candle industry in 2026 is very different than it looked even just a few years ago. Now, that is partially because customers are more educated, competition's stronger, prices are higher. But guess what? That applies to everyone in almost every industry. So whether you are a candle maker, a soap maker, running a restaurant, opening a retail store, have a clothing brand, run a little boutique, run a coffee shop, costs have gone up for everyone, competition is stronger than ever, and that's okay. Don't let that deter you. That's part of business, that's the nature of being an entrepreneur, and that is completely fine. These things are always changing. What is important is to recognize what has changed and to realize what you should do to put yourself in the best situation to succeed as possible. So let's talk about some of the components. Wax costs more. Jars cost more. Fragrance oils cost more. Shipping costs more, both to receive and for you to send to customers. Insurance costs more. That means your pricing, your profit margins are going to change, and they're going to matter even more importantly than they did before. But again, that is okay. That doesn't mean that there's an issue. It doesn't mean to keep everything you have the same or your original plans are going to work. It simply means you need to adjust. So if costs go up, that means your prices will most likely go up as well, or you have to find other areas to minimize costs. But again, totally normal. Customers understand that everything's gone up in price as well because everything out there is costing them more, not just your products. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to stand out and how to make your products still the most attractive out there so that your customers aren't going to go away simply because prices have gone up. And if you're a new business, which is mostly what this video is about, is sort of starting a candle business. If I were going to start a candle business right now, these are the things I would consider. So that'll apply to all of you that are just thinking about getting into the industry and all of you that already run a small business that need to maybe adapt or make a few changes going forward. And again, we'll get into the details here in just a minute, but speaking of standing out, customers have seen everything at this point, right? They can spot generic candle brands that are marketed to the masses and don't really kind of cater to them. So if your brand doesn't have a identity or a purpose, it's going to struggle to stand out more than it used to. There's a lot more resources out there. There's a lot more education out there. There's a lot more opportunity out there for new people to get in this industry. And if all you're doing is making basic products like everyone else that don't really have an identity, a purpose, a story, a narrative, or a niche to them, it's going to be really difficult to stand out from everyone else doing the same thing. This is why, in my opinion, having a specific niche or theme for your business is no longer optional. You don't just sell candles, you sell a theme, a feeling, a story, a lifestyle. All right. So with that in mind, let's move on to section 2, which is specifically how to choose that niche and your fragrance or brand identity. So I'm assuming most of you already know what a niche is when it comes to having a business, but it's basically having a theme to your business, an identity, something that like when someone hears or sees, they know that's part of your brand. It makes your business more memorable. It helps customers instantly recognize and understand your candles are for them. So instead of your customers saying, oh, look, another candle, you want your customer to say, oh, there's that travel candle brand. There's that sports candle brand. There's that cabin brand. There's that dark, moody, masculine scent brand, right? You want to have something that people can relate to and gravitate towards. Now, I know what many of you that are brand new to this or might be thinking, which is, well, if I limit myself that much and focus on a specific theme, aren't I limiting my options to everyone else? Yes, but that's a good thing. When you try to sell to everyone, you sell to no one. Unless you're a giant big box store with millions of dollars going around and you're already in all these shops and it's just like, you're just selling a can of peas that people just buy generic brands from. That's very different than selling a product like this. There are tons of generic brands out there in this industry, and you're rarely going to be able to compete with them. So you need something that stands out that says, this is a different brand, something I don't just see every single day. Does it relate to me? Is there a story? Is there a theme? Is there something I can feel like I kind of have to have that product? I've got to try it out, right? There's a lot of fantastic niches out there in sports brands. There's a lot of options when it comes to creating a niche, but that's why it's very, very important. You want to create a vibe that fits their home, their style, their hobbies. That is what is going to get those customers to want your products and no one else's. So yes, you can have a generic brand, but there's nothing for those customers to choose your generic brand over anyone else. If you have a theme or a specific niche for those customers that they can relate to, they only can get your brand, or they have a lot less options to get something similar compared to all the generic brand. It's easier to sell. It's easier to market to. It's also easier to come up with your fragrances, your names, and your packaging because you already have an identity. So it's very easy to kind of mold all those together and tell a unique, unifying story. Once your niche is clear, then it's time to kind of choose those fragrances, your packaging, your colors, your designs, everything, all that identity should support that overall big picture. Your fragrance choices should be intentional and cohesive, not random. Same thing with your colors, your labels, your packaging design. Everything should look like your brand. So now the next section is about branding and packaging. And we're just going to touch on this a little bit. If I hadn't said before, we're going to cover kind of the core elements throughout this video with some tips and tricks on why it's important and how to achieve it. We're not going to be able to go into every single little detail about how you can accomplish every one of these objectives in each section. This would be like a 4-hour-long video. We've got specific videos on this channel that dive into some of these a little bit more detail, and there's plenty of other resources out there as well. I also failed to mention earlier that I do a video like this, maybe I mentioned it, every single year, and I would encourage you to go back to the previous videos if you haven't watched them yet and watch those. The reason is things change a little bit, but some of the advice is very, very important throughout all of them. And also, in each video, we go about it a little bit different. So each video structure is a little different, and we dive into more details in some of the videos than others. Some have more of a blueprint and roadmap. Some are more about kind of marketing and behind the scenes. So it's really important to kind of watch all of these. But long story short, I'm not going to be able to go into every single detail in each one of these sections. So just keep that in mind. If you have any questions, ask in the comments. Go to my Facebook group, the Black Tie Barn Makers Group. Visit the website. We've got other resources to help you out if you have any questions with any of these. All right, so back to packaging and branding. Branding's no longer about just looking good or being pretty. It's about being recognizable, as I talked about before. You want your brand to stand out, but more importantly, you need your brand to be cohesive so that you're not scattered, people aren't sure what they're looking for. Now, there are times it's completely okay to venture out a little bit, try something new, see how it resonates with your audience. We do that at Black Tie Barn. In fact, we did that recently with a new fragrance release to see, like, do people like this look a little bit better? We'll change our naming convention up at times. We'll try something different in our newsletters and our colors and our graphics. It's all about getting information, and then we use that information to make the best decision. But overall, big picture, everything should be cohesive and recognizable. Now, that means your labels, your packaging, your colors, your fonts, product names, everything should be telling the same story. When someone sees your candle, they should immediately feel the vibe of your brand. Strong branding builds trust, perceives value of your products, and makes pricing much easier than the alternative. The next thing we're going to talk about is legal and business setup. Now, again, I'm not going to go into all the details of this. I've got a specific dedicated video on the channel that goes into all the things you need to consider and the steps to achieve the proper business setup. Bear in mind, depending on your location, your state, your country, your city, there are variations. So every state has different rules. Every county or city has different rules. The best piece of advice I could give you is to go to your local city business office and just ask them for their checklist. Like, what all do I need to run a business here? Now, even if you're outside of city limits, go to your city, go to your county, wherever, and ask for that information. They will give you a rundown of what you need to do. And then, of course, there's a few things at the federal level. You'll need to get a DBA, which is your doing business as name. You might need to get a tax identification number. There's a few things you need to do, but those steps are outlined. If you just go see your city business office, they can help you tremendously with this. But the problem is, this is the part that most people skip when they're getting started, and then they regret it later, because many of these things are extremely difficult to change or do once you've been in business for a while. So do this first and foremost. Once you have your idea. My previous video on this topic, or maybe it was 2 years ago, sort of had this timeline blueprint of what to do in what order, at least in my opinion. And check out that video. It kind of breaks this down for you a little bit. I'll have it linked below. But in a nutshell, you want to register your business properly. That could be as a sole proprietor with a doing business as or fictitious name, or an LLC, which is what we are. Most companies, once they have any kind of established business, they change to an LLC. And then once you're large enough, you can still be an LLC, but file your taxes as an S Corp, for example. Again, I don't want to overwhelm or kind of muddy the waters here. The main point here is to register your business properly. What that means, talk to your bookkeeper, talk to a small business attorney. Most of them do 1-hour consults for either free or very minimum cost. If you have any questions, or just do a little research online, you can get lots of advice. Also, it's very, very important to start tracking your expenses from the get-go. Don't wait, it gets harder. Can you backtrack? Yes. Do I recommend it? No. It's very difficult to go back and do it. So once you realize, I'm going to start buying things, at the very least, keep all your receipts, put them in a shoebox, open up a Google Doc or a Google Sheet or a spreadsheet, a notepad, anything, and start writing down your expense, where it was, the date, what you bought, and why. That will help you down the road, because as a new business, all of these expenses are deductions. Now, some of these expenses might not be realized to the next year, like inventory and things, but you have the right as a small business, as a new business, to deduct all of your startup expenses that first year if you want, or you can capitalize it over several years. Again, talk to your accountant, your bookkeeper, they'll help you with all of this. All you need to worry about is tracking your expenses and keeping receipts. Separate your business and your personal finances. That's the other key takeaway here. If you can, get a separate bank account. Right off the bat. If you don't have a business established yet and you can't get a different checking account in the business name, just open a separate and only use it for business. You can change it later, move money later if you have to, but the more you can separate personal and business, the better it will do you. Treating your candle business as a real business from the get-go will make everything easier for you down the road. All right, section 5 is all about product development and testing. Testing matters for 2 reasons: performance and safety. Now, here's the weird irony about this, is that when new candle makers start off, they're excited about this part. Like, they can't wait to get in and start testing and making test products, and the product development aspects, like that's what interests them. The funny thing is a few months in, this is the part they dread the most. Like, they don't want to test. It drives them nuts. It's difficult. It feels like it wastes time. It can get expensive. It's just funny. It's always been funny to me how this kind of flips for everyone, but it's normal. If you go through that, don't feel weird. Like, that's just what everyone goes through for the most part. Now, let's get back to why testing is important though. Performance and safety. Performance testing ensures that your candles burn correctly, smell strong enough, perform consistently, and you can say, like, this is a solid product that I can stand behind and I think my customers will like. Now, that can mean many things. It can mean the way the candle looks, the way it fits their aesthetics, their home, their lifestyle. It could be the label. It could be the smell. It could be the color. Basically, just performance testing is all about how this candle burns. Is it optimal, and does it resonate well with my customers? I have a video that talks about using test groups, whether it's local friends and family or a small test pilot group, to help you with this step, where you provide them candles at cost or for free for their feedback, genuine feedback on what they liked, disliked about the candle, what could be improved. They might not know all the technical details, but they can still help you. That video has a very detailed sort of customer feedback chart or card or info sheet that I like to use, and you'll get invaluable information doing that. Part 1 of testing is about performance. If your candle doesn't perform, nothing else really matters. The other part that's important about testing is safety testing. This ensures your candle doesn't overheat, it's not sooting excessively, it doesn't pose a fire risk, it doesn't crack when it's burning, you're not having mushroom carbon buildup so much that it falls down in the wax and sparks. Those are the main things that happen or that you're looking for with safety testing. But testing protects your customers and your business. So that is why it's important to focus on these two aspects. The good news is, well, let me back up. Starting off, this is challenging because you don't necessarily know where to start, especially on performance testing. If you're just now sampling waxes for the first time, you don't know what wicks to use, you're still trying to get your feet wet. Like, how do I even make a candle, let alone how well it performs? So take baby steps, take your time. Performance testing takes the longest out of everything. So if you feel like you're behind, you're probably not. Just stick with it and keep testing. The simpler you can make this process, the better. What I mean by that is start with one wax, 3 or 4 fragrance oils, and some wick samples. At Black Tie Barn, we sell wick sample kits, a very popular wicks. We don't sell wax yet, but we are going to be fairly soon. But and then of course we sell fragrance oils. Our fragrance oils are fantastic. So get yourself a few of these, test them out with some basic jars, basic recipes, or instructions on how to make a basic candle, which you can find on this channel. You can find it on Facebook, you can find it in Google. Again, if you go to my group on Facebook, Black Tie Barn Makers Group, you'll get so many people in there that are willing to help you out. Anyways, you're going to make just a basic candle or 2 or 3, and you're going to keep doing this process until you start feeling like my candle smells good and it looks like it's burning well, and then you can perfect it as time goes on. But this part takes the longest. The good news, now that I'm circling back, is all of this testing gets far easier the longer you make candles. Once you've learned how to make a good performing candle, it's not quite rinse and repeat, because anything you change, if you change your jar, certainly if you change your wax, if you change your fragrance oils, you need to retest for each new product just to make sure it's still like performing well. Once you know that, then that recipe is kind of locked in, and then you can move on to the next product. So that gets easier because you get more accustomed and used to your products. Like you know your products better, so it's easier to replicate. Same thing with safety. Once you determine like wax in this jar and this wick all perform pretty well, you're almost always going to have the safety part ready to go. But when you make a single candle, you're testing for both safety and performance at the same time. So you can really cut down the time it takes to roll out new products the longer you do this. All right, let's talk about pricing and margins. Another very overwhelming and challenging thing for a lot of people that are brand new to business, not just candle making, but business in general. Pricing must support sustainability. In other words, you need to be able to price your products as something you can continue to keep those prices at. So if you're trying to just get new business by, selling your candles at cost at like $5 a candle or something, sounds great. You'll build traction, you'll build some awareness, but the moment you have to jack your prices up because you're not making any money, it could be an issue. Now, that is different than introductory pricing. That is different than a targeted marketing plan or something intentional like a promotion. That's very different. But generally speaking, make sure your pricing can sustain growth. It can sustain changes. It can sustain fluctuations. It can sustain discounts and sales, loss, waste, all of those things. So a good rule of thumb is, and this is a very generic, very vague rule of thumb, but most people start off by pricing their candles about 3 to 4 times your cost. This gives you room for profit, it gives you room for promotions, and it gives you room for growth. Generally speaking, that's a pretty good formula. And honestly, starting off, I would go with that. I have other videos on this channel that break down more specific or advanced pricing if you want to check it out. But honestly, there's so many factors that go into pricing. It's your cost, it's your competition, it's your niche, it's your specific industry and location. I mean, there's a lot of things that can affect cost. I mean, there could be 2 identical companies, one in the Midwest and one in LA, that are potentially gonna have different pricing just because the market's different. Also, the benefit, as I talked about earlier, of running a niche-based business that has a strong brand and theme, as those customers will pay more for your product that seems very catered to them specifically versus a generic brand. So another benefit is you get more room for profit margin if you have a niche or theme-based business. Back to the pricing. Why 3 to 4 times your cost? Well, as we talked about, it gives you some room for profit. You have some flexibility, room for growth, room to invest in more inventory, more products, gives you room and opportunity to have sales and promotions and discounts, lots of reasons. Here is the problem, and this is where people can run into issues with pricing, is they almost overcommit to 3 to 4 times the cost. Like they pick a formula and they just run with it, but the components inside their formula are wrong. For example, it's 3 to 4 times your cost. Well, what your cost is seems to vary very much between candle maker to candle maker. And that's because some of them include their overhead. Some of them only include the raw material costs, like the wax and the jars and the wicks and the fragrance. Some of them include their shipping to get those materials delivered to them, which is called freight in or inbound shipping. Others include the cost to ship out because maybe they priced their product to include free shipping. Others include labor if they have employees. Others include labor if they include themselves. There are so many factors here. So my personal advice that I would recommend to everyone starting out or anyone just looking to sort of kind of start over on their pricing is to include any cost that directly go into production or manufacturing of your product. So what does that mean? Obviously your raw materials, your jar, your wax, your wicks, your labels, your lids on your jars, warning label, any packaging that's part of the product. Like if you sell all of your candles in a little custom box, that's part of your cost. But there's a little bit more to it than just the raw materials that go into your products. The other thing that I would consider is figuring out an average hourly rate that you would pay an employee if you were to hire someone part-time. What would you pay them hourly to help you make candles? Take that number and divide that by the number of candles you think you can make in 1 hour. Let's say that adds another 30 cents to your cost. Maybe you can make, I'm not going to do the math right now, but if you can make 20 candles an hour or 50 candles an hour and you're willing to pay someone $15 or $18 an hour, just throwing numbers out, do the quick math division, you can figure out how much you need to add to the cost of your candle, of one candle. Now, here's where things can get a little tricky, but I'm just going to keep it simple for you for now. Well, maybe. From an accounting perspective, legal perspective, if you are the owner of your business, like you're an LLC, you're not paid hourly rates like a regular employee, unless you are structured as a corporation. You get paid from the profits. So from a legal and tax perspective, your hourly rate actually doesn't get included. However, you should always at least price your products to assume that it has. Meaning, that's why I said, if you were going to hire someone to help you make candles, what would you pay them? Work that cost into each individual candle. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. But that will protect your business and allow it to, remember what we said at the very beginning, make sure your pricing meets and supports sustainability and growth. As your business grows, guess what? You are going to hire part-time help to help you make your products. That's why that cost needs to be part of making your candles, the overall cost, because you can't just add it later. Well, you can, but why would you do that? Make sure your candles are priced correctly from the beginning. Lots of businesses fail early on because of finances. They don't know how to manage their finances. They can't keep up with their costs and their expenses. So get this right from the beginning, give yourself some wiggle room, and make sure that you can sustain doing this because it's tough in any business to make money your first year or two. So give yourself the best shot. Now, here's the good news. As your business grows, a lot of your costs will actually go down per item, per product, because you're saving money on bulk inventory purchases, bulk shipping, and so on. Now, as you grow, you'll get some other expenses. It could be software, that could be employee payroll, it could be more overhead on your building, more utilities, a bigger space, all of that for sure. And just a side note, there is advanced ways to build those costs into your items, but starting off, it's almost impossible because you're probably making in your house. It's impossible to know how many you can produce within a given hour, and then you work that into the math of what your utility bill is for your house and split that off to the business versus personal. It's just too much. So starting off, I just don't recommend doing that. Make sure your products, though, are priced accordingly. And then as you grow, overhead will go up generally, but your individual product costs will often go down. So if anything, you can either lower prices as you grow, or you just get better margins. That's why it's important to start off with the proper pricing from the get-go. All right, so now let's talk about something that's very important, not everyone enjoys doing or is good at doing it, and that is marketing and advertising. Now, marketing in 2026 is quite different than it was like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. It's not just about SEO, search engine optimization. It's not just about running ads. It's not just about having the best products or the best pricing or the most influence. It's about having connection, following people that support you, your business, your story. Best ways to do this are short form video. That can be TikTok, that can be Instagram, that can be YouTube Shorts and Reels. Behind the scenes content is a really good way to connect to your audience. Actually, it's something I wish we did more of. You all see a lot of our behind the scenes just because of the nature of my channel and what we do. But I probably need to get better at just showing more behind the scenes. I did a little bit when we purchased some new equipment just to kind of show you what we're doing and things we're improving. We need to get better at it. So behind the scenes content is awesome. People love to see that, and then they feel like they relate to you more on a personal level. Also, storytelling. This gets, and I don't mean like literally reading a book, storytelling about your brand. This is why it's important, as I mentioned, to have a niche or a theme, because you want your brand to tell a story, which makes it easier for your products to tell a story because they support your brand, easier for you when you're doing content, easier for your influencers if you have any, easier to make graphics and ad campaigns and all these things if you have a unified theme and story. Email marketing, another huge one. We've done email marketing for, well, I'm not really sure how long. We continue to increase that. You're going to start off small, but the earlier you can start getting email signups, either from every order, or if you're doing craft shows, have a little email list, offer them a coupon for joining the list, build your list through Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, encourage people to join the list by giving them a freebie or a discount, something like that. You own that email list, and the best way to get more customers, or the best way to get your customers to purchase more, is through direct marketing, like email. They get your email specifically saying, hey, we released a new product. Actually, right now, while we're recording this video, we have a sale going and a new spring fragrance release. Now, by the time this video posts, that will be over, but we're always doing new ones if you're curious. But encourage people to sign up to those newsletters because that goes directly to them. And even if only a very small percentage of people see it, open it, click on it, and purchase, which, by the way, that's pretty true, anywhere between 1 and like 6% actually purchase, that's totally fine. That's money, A, you would have had, and B, that adds up so much, and that can be a ton. As your newsletter grows to 20,000 people, 15,000 people, or less, 5,000 people, that's a lot more business that you didn't have before. All right, speaking of which, there should be a link in this video. If not, go to the website, very bottom, sign up for the newsletter. That's how you join our email newsletter. And again, that's where we put out new products, sales, first access to things, information, resources that might help you. Definitely consider joining that. Another one is SMS marketing. Now, this one I wouldn't really do right off the bat because it's more expensive, and a lot of platforms have a minimum fee, and if you don't have enough text SMS signups, you're paying for nothing. But as you continue to build it, you might as well start collecting it. You don't have to actually use it yet, but you can start collecting it and think about it down the road. In-person events also work really good for small businesses to market their business and get your name out there. Word of mouth is huge for small businesses. It's even more important for small new businesses. It builds trust, it engages customers, new customers, but also repeat customers. And again, branding, tell a story, relate. This is how you connect. Remember, marketing and advertising right now is all about connecting. You don't need to be everywhere, right? You don't need to be on every platform, but you need to be consistent where your audience already is or where you want them to be. So when you're starting off, choose 1 or 2 platforms, get comfortable at them, start getting content, then you can branch out and add some more. No matter if you have 1 platform, social platform, or 10, try to be consistent. Now, for many people, this is the fun part. This is about scaling, growing your business, maybe tapping into some new revenue streams like wholesale, for example. Others, this kind of scares them and they don't ever want to reach this point, and that's completely fine. If you want to stay safe, if you want to stay on the smaller side and just keep it very simple and manageable, sell from your website or at craft shows, direct to customer, totally fine. Actually, I did that for a long time when I first started because that's all I wanted to do. Like, I got into this industry originally by accident. If you're curious, I got a video on the channel about my origin story, so to speak. It's kind of funny, but it's also fairly, informative too. Things have changed drastically for me over the past 12, 15 years. So point being, you don't have to scale. You don't. If you're doing this as side income, you don't have to scale. If you don't want to grow this into a larger business with employees, you don't have to do that. But for many of you, that is a goal, even if it's just a couple employees, right? So let's talk very briefly about scaling and wholesale. I've got videos on both these topics if you want more details, but it's kind of hard to cover in one video. But scaling basically means improving your systems, not just selling more. It's about growing, but growing efficiently, not just selling more, but selling more the right way. Now, this is a huge challenge to businesses that are having a lot of growth, especially if it's unexpected. This has happened to us, oh man, probably half a dozen times since we've been in business. And there's been two or three times that I can think offhand that it was overwhelming. It was shocking how much growth we were experiencing in such a short period of time that it became very difficult to handle and sustain and to like survive that growth. And so it can be scary because like when you start getting so many orders, like how the heck am I going to fulfill this, right? The longest fulfillment time we ever had was I think 18 days. And that was around a Black Friday, but we had other things going on too. It was actually not too long ago. It was Black Friday, the same time we had released new fragrances, the same time we were moving locations to our new place, and the same time that my little boy actually was in a very significant car accident, hit by a drunk driver, backseat. They were lucky to survive. Time in the hospital, ICU, lots of recovery at home after surgeries. Long story, if you're on my newsletter, you saw updates about that, or if you're in the group, but got through it. Everyone's good now for the most part. But we had all that stuff happen at the same time. You can't account for that. You have no idea something like that could happen when you have a perfect storm of, I mean, some of it we knew, right? Like some of it was moving to the warehouse. Unfortunately, it was the same time around the holidays, which we couldn't avoid because we had to get into place. That's the only time we could do it. So kind of unavoidable, kind of avoidable. But the other things were just thrown at us, and they were thrown on our plate, and there's nothing you can do but try to weather the storm, which is what we did. And we recovered. Like I said, there was a 2 or 3 week period that was super difficult. We got through it, back on our feet. We were back to 1 day shipping, 2 days shipping right after. We've had a couple situations similar to that. That was the worst one. And all you can do is do your best to plan for situations like that. Think about what you would do if that happens. Get extra help, have people around that support you and help you if something like that happens. But it can be very, very stressful. Like, how do I fill this many orders? I need extra help. It gets overwhelming. So if that ever happens to you, keep your head up, keep pushing, reach out to help, family, friends, heck, get on the Facebook group, Black Tie Barn Makers group, and just let people know what's going on. And I can guarantee you there's going to be people at least willing to try to help you or give you some resources or do what they can. So communication is key when something like that happens. That's the other thing I want to add into scaling. If you are in the process of scaling, communicate to your customers so they know what's going on. It doesn't have to be in detail, but let them know so they can understand the situation. Keep them updated. If you have delays for any reasons, whether they're in your control or outside your control, let them know. We were constantly sending out updated announcements on our website and through the email to let people know, like, here's what's going on, here's why it happened, here's our plan. And then we gave updates as the progress went on. And then finally we're caught up. And it was like, hey, thank you everyone for being patient. Here's another discount. I mean, you don't have to do that part, but we did. So scaling it's about increasing efficiencies, making improvements that make your job easier, not just about selling more, but it's also about communication. So one of the things a lot of people do when they're scaling is wholesale. Now, wholesale simply means selling your products at a discount to a store so they can turn around and retail your products on their shelves. I'm not going to get onto the pros and cons on this, but just know that the pro is more business, more volume, and hopefully more sales and revenue overall, but your individual profit margins are at like half what you're used to. That's why the other reason it's important to price your products correctly, because if you ever want to do wholesale, make sure your normal retail price allows for that. If 50% of that is too low, that you're going to lose money, you're not priced properly. If you never plan to get in a wholesale, I guess that matters less. But in my opinion, you should price your products correctly anyways, even if you're not going to plan on wholesale. Because you never know. You never know. And wholesalers all vary. Some of them will take your products for like 30% off, and you're making 70% margins on wholesale. Very rare. Those are ridiculously good margins for wholesale, by the way. Most people are around 50% or even less. I've seen wholesalers 30 to 50%. Your margins are small, but you're making it up in total volume. That's the idea of it. Now, it can be a really powerful growth channel if your pricing and production and brands are ready, but you've got to do it with intent. If you're not growing intentionally, then you're doing it recklessly, and that's how you can get yourself into some problems. You don't want to be just working to work and then breaking even all the time. Have a plan. Did I just have a weird kind of Southern drawl when I said over time? Anyways, have a plan, go about it intentionally. Before you go, I'm gonna let you go, but I wanna give you a little bit of some final advice. And first and foremost, remember, check out the resources below in the video description because there's links to other videos. There's links to products or tools, equipment, materials that I would use. You can just get them off Amazon if you're looking for cheap ways to get started. But there's also the links to our newsletters and our website and some of our products. What else? There's a lot of information that can help you. And then again, also check out the previous videos in this series about how to start a candle business. There's a lot of information we didn't cover in those that we covered here and ones we don't cover in here that we did in those videos. So kind of use them as like a giant master game plan and piece it all together. If you're looking on specific videos about how to actually make a candle, got great tutorials on this channel to help you out as well. If you want to dive into any of these topics more specifically, check out those videos. I'll do my best to link the ones we've talked about below. But if you go to the channel, subscribe if you're not already, because if you subscribe when we release new videos, you'll be notified. Turn on the notifications. But it also, once you're subscribed, you can go to our library and see all the videos we have and just browse the ones that look like might pertain to you, to be the most helpful to you. The last piece of advice is to build slowly, build intentionally, and build something that you're proud of. All right, the first part of that, build slow. If you try to run this race too quickly, you're going to get burnt out, or you're going to run out of money, and everything's going to feel scattered and unintentional. You will feel it, your customers will notice it. Build intentionally, have a plan, pick a niche, pick a marketing, something that you feel like you can continue to do with the brand. You can support the branding, you can tell the story, it fits you, it fits your vibe. Make sure it makes sense and go about it with intent. Don't do it recklessly, like you're just kind of throwing up whatever and seeing what sticks. And then lastly, as I mentioned, build something that you're proud of. You want to I assume you're doing this because it's something you have interest in and want to do. And then you're going to sell these to family and friends and to others, and then hopefully continue to build this and grow this out. You want it to be something you're proud of, not ashamed of, right? It'll keep you more motivated to build it and keep it going if you're really invested in it and you're proud to be doing it. And look, last thing I want to say is that the candle businesses that are surviving all the time are not the ones that are chasing every single new trend. Be yourself. They're the ones that are focused, consistent, committed to their brand identity, to their story, to their niche, to their theme. The other important reason to pick that niche is it's easy to commit, it's easy to be more consistent, it prevents you from chasing every little new trend. Now, that doesn't mean trying new things and sampling new things. And you have to be able to adapt as a business owner, for sure. But chasing trends is a way to never let your business grow. So build a platform, build a foundation, and grow it. That's the best way to survive in this business. And if you pick a niche and pick a theme, you stick on that, that is what's going to make you successful. If you keep things generic with no plan, everything's just scattered, everything you do is going to look random, right? So that would be my biggest takeaways, pieces of advice from this. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the candle business industry if you are new. If you're not, I hope this still helped you out. I'm so thankful for all of you being part of this community, your support during my son's accident, but also for the business in general. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments. Any feedback at all, sign up for the newsletter, check out the links, go to the website, and check out our fragrance oils if you haven't already. They are amazing. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.